And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first regular season Hoops HD report here at hoopshd.com. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, streaming to you live from southern New Jersey with some of our normal cast of characters here tonight, beginning with John Teitel. John, fresh back from storming the court in D.C. there. How are you doing tonight?
Very good, thank you. It was a long walk back in the cold weather to get here, but glad I could make it to give you all the details of the GW amazing win over the Who's.
With the Who's, and unfortunately our Who's alum Joby is not here tonight. It would have been really interesting if he had been. But we'll give a quick shout out to him.
Oh boy.
Also with us is John Sleeka, John S. How you doing there, John?
Oh, I'm doing quite well here in Big East/Bengal country tonight.
You guys are still undefeated there in the NFL, aren't you?
That's correct.
Oh, that'll change soon. But finally joining us as well is David Griggs. David, now this is just the beginning of your video casting for the night, I believe, because after we're done with this, you're just going to go ahead and stream yourself watching games for the next 24 hours now that we're into the marathon, correct?
No. Well, no. When I agreed to this, I thought it was going to be the four of us, 26 hours all the way through.
Oh, it's all of us.
Yes.
Well, I'm gonna have to get a little help from my job about that. But David, I want to start with you tonight, actually, because we are now into, as we record this Monday evening, most of you will probably be watching this sometime Tuesday, but as we record this Monday evening, we are now into the fourth day of the college basketball season, and really, I don't think the college basketball season quite starts out the way a lot of the other sports seasons do.
No, it doesn't, and it is sort of like annoyingly inconspicuous. When you look at the NFL, for instance, they have the game on Thursday. I don't watch a lot of NFL, but is it a Super Bowl rematch or the Super Bowl winner hosts, and they throw this big party, and then all throughout week one it's a big deal. Opening day in baseball is just a huge day on the sports calendar. For some major league teams, it might be the only game they sell out. College football opens big. The NBA, it's kind of a big deal. College basketball is so unceremonious, and it's bothered me for a long. I mean, to start the second Friday in November, it's a Friday night. It's a time of year when there isn't really a lot else going on the sports calendar. They kind of have it to themselves, and instead of being this big blowout starting off with a bang, they start off with a little toy pop gun. 90% of the games are huge mismatches that are uninteresting, and they're played in front of half-empty arenas. And even when a game is decent, and I know I've been picking on Valpo and Twitter and all that, but why is it Valpo on the weekend, a good team themselves, probably a tournament team, we certainly like them, they're playing against Iona, who's another good team. Did you see that game? It was a third empty. It's just, where is everybody now? Why does college basketball start off so weak?
I was focused on another game on Friday night, but I'm still waiting for the second half to begin on that one.
That's another thing we need to get. Gimmick games have got to go. They've got to stop.
That's actually a good segue, because there was one marquee matchup on the opening night played overseas in Japan at an armed forces base. But you play a game on a temporary court in a building without air conditioning in a very humid area during a rainy season, and lo and behold, the court's too wet to play on.
And it was a mess. You couldn't play on it, and I actually, when I say gimmick games, we were getting a little bit ridiculous with them. I think, Chad, was it a few years ago, you had all these different scenarios, like driving around in a truck and playing a game inside the truck, and getting on a submarine and submerging it and playing a game, and like the Ferris wheel. You wanted to play a game on a Ferris wheel. I mean, I'm all for supporting our troops around the world and doing this, but is it too much to ask that the court conditions be suitable? How does this happen?
Well, there was one place where they were suitable, and that was over in Annapolis, Maryland.
Yeah.
but you're right. I mean, we had these aircraft carrier games. I mean, luckily we didn't have. There was talk a few years ago about going to Cowboy Stadium, playing like 5 games on simultaneous courts. I don't know if you remember that story or not.
Yeah, I
The
do.
selection
Worst
committee
idea I've ever
chairman
heard.
is responsible for that.
Worst idea ever.
But Pitt Gonzaga, they played a half. They did not finish the game. They're not going to finish the game. So I guess the one question I want to throw out there about that game is, do you think this is a game that could come back, the fact that they weren't able to finish it, to haunt one or both of these teams at the end of the year? Let me throw it over to you, John T. We haven't heard from you yet. I don't know if you got to see half a basketball game Friday night or not, but
I did. It was a lovely 20 minutes of basketball. The joke being that they flew 20 hours to play for 20 minutes, which I think is hilarious. I think it's actually going to come back to hurt Pitt. They announced the rankings, I believe, every Monday, and I checked today, and Yale got a vote, and Pitt did not have any votes. Like, I don't know if you're not allowed to count it, which means you're not even allowed to consider it. But how on earth is Pitt not getting a vote?
well,
I think you nailed it. The stats don't count.
I wonder. The stats don't count. Is the committee allowed to consider, if they have Pitt sitting there on the bubble in March, say, hey, they did, even though it doesn't count, they did play well for a half against the Zags. It's not a victory, but they played well for a half.
I guess they can if they want to. It's their committee, but I don't think they will. This has happened before. If you might recall, Georgetown and was it Florida?
Yep.
Yeah, one year did not finish a game, and I want to say Ohio State and Marquette didn't finish a game, even though they had a backup plan in place. They were going to go to the Citadel, I think it was, but both teams and coaches just opted not to play. I don't think that they will. I just think it never happened.
Well, let's get into some of the other games that took place over this past weekend. There were quite a few upsets, and let's start with probably the biggest shocker of them all. Western Illinois going into Wisconsin, knocking off the Badgers. Everybody laughed at me, I think, when I said that Wisconsin was going to be a bubble team this year. You guys all still laughing at me?
Yes.
Okay.
because they're not going to – I mean, you don't – like I said, you don't lose to Western Illinois and be a bubble team.
Well, you've gone beyond me even, and you're throwing them out of the field. But
Yeah.
A few of the other notable upsets, though, we saw North Florida, who was an NCAA tournament team last year, going into Illinois and winning. John T., we saw that Bill and Mary team you liked a lot going down to NC State and winning.
Yeah, I remember somebody mentioning that William and Mary was finally going to make the tourney for the first time ever. Thank you for a little props. I appreciate it.
Yes. They didn't just beat NC State. They curb stomped them all over the place in front of that half-empty arena. Anyway.
A couple other games to note. Chattanooga went in and won at Georgia. This is a game we actually picked last week as a game to keep an eye on for a possible upset. I think we can all pat ourselves on the back for that one. Belmont winning at Marquette, David. What did you think about this Belmont team?
I was actually impressed with them. One of the things is that they were on the road in front of that half-empty arena on opening night, and but the crowd was into it. And what impressed me was that every time Marquette seemed to – Belmont led for most of the game, but Marquette would either mount a run and the crowd would get into it, and it would appear that they would have momentum. But Belmont staved it off every single time. And I thought that was a really good win for them. I think that's the kind of win that can get them inside the bubble if they don't win the conference tournament. Having said that, as we're recording this, Belmont is having all kinds of trouble with a lower level Summit League team in IUPUI. So maybe it wasn't that impressive after all.
Marquette's having trouble with IUPUI.
Yeah, Marquette. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Belmont has other distractions tonight to deal with.
Yeah.
Let me throw it over here to John T. I know you probably enjoyed this one. Arizona State losing at home in Bobby Hurley's opener to Sacramento State.
Yeah, there were not a lot of tears shed in the Titel household that night. But Hurley's a good coach. He'll turn it around. But as I think I mentioned, the cupboard is not that full. It'll take some time. I think he can be a good recruiter. I know he's a good coach. But, yeah, it was a pretty bad loss, to be honest.
Yeah, and John S., even though we did not get our game in Japan, we did get a game in China, as Shaka's era at Texas started with a loss to a Washington team, a young Washington team that I thought was going to be a year away, but that's a huge win for them to start the season.
Yeah, it certainly is going to help Washington more than it is going to hurt Texas at this point.
A couple other games in note. Boise State lost, albeit on the road at Montana, and wasn't looking that good tonight either in their second game.
Yeah, they're starting to open it up a little bit. They've opened it up to 15, but that's okay. That's not impressive. That's what's expected. In a game against, I think it's Northern Arizona.
Yeah, Northern Arizona at home tonight.
In front of might I mention, it's a half-empty arena that they're playing in.
One of the better games in terms of the exciting finishes Friday night was Auburn's home win over UAB. This was really a game that we thought UAB had to win too. There was an undermanned Auburn team.
Yeah.
They just failed to get it done. And another big upset that John T, I'm sure you enjoyed as well, and I even came decked out for tonight here. Monmouth Hawks.
All right.
Knocking off UCLA.
The Pac-12 has been on a little inauspicious start this year, but I thought UCLA was actually going to be decent. I still think that Bryce Alford would be the conference player of the year and lead them in scoring and assists, but they have a long way to go as well. It was a very embarrassing loss.
Yeah, and I guess that is not good news for the Pac-12. I liked the Pac-12 this year, as you saw in my preseason bracket, and they have not done me any favors yet this year.
Yeah, and we're going to go through my bracket line by line, about 10 minutes on each line here in a little bit, right, Jed?
And how many times are Nebraska mentioned on there?
Oh, they're
pretty much every spot, I think.
Yeah, every spot.
David, how about the start for the SWAC this year? I know it's a little bit under the radar, but 3 big wins here. Alabama A&M knocking off Tulane.
Yeah.
We saw Virginia Tech fall to a SWAC team, and we saw Mississippi State fall to a SWAC team tonight, Southern.
Yes, and as we're speaking, Alabama State has just tied UAB. I don't know how delayed this is, but again, beating UAB, Mississippi State, Virginia Tech, and Tulane is hardly noteworthy unless you're the SWAC, which there were many years where they won fewer than 10 out-of-conference games combined. So the fact that they're beating anybody, much less some brand-name teams, is they are noticeably better than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah. Grambling even hung in there in their first game, and Grambling's our defending Centenary Award winner as our worst team in Division I. So, been an impressive start for the SWAC and non-conference play over some of these name brand teams. John S., probably the game of the weekend though came in Georgetown. Not the game of the game of the season, but at least the game of the weekend. What do you think about that Georgetown game?
Yeah, it took a couple of overtimes, but the other Highlanders, not the old team of the people, but the Radford Highlanders, was able to come out of Georgetown with a victory in double overtime with a game-winning shot. Now, Radford, they were not able to follow up their victory over VCU because they did lose earlier tonight, but also gone are the days when Radford could possibly take over a spot from either Georgetown or VCU in, the 2K Classic?
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a few minutes here. I didn't give our rundown for the evening, but we're trying to move through some of these games quickly because we're going to get right into a preview of the Exempt, all the Exempt tournament bracketed games here. Want to just run through a couple other games, and I guess the other games of the season so far also happened in D.C. And John T, you were there tonight. Give us a little report on the GW Virginia game.
I would be happy to. My friend Seth came through with these amazing seats, 10th row, opposite where Tony Bennett sits at the end of the bench. Fantastic seats. It's a very tiny arena at the Charles E. Smith Center. I think it holds 5,000 or less, and it was packed to capacity. Michael Wilbon was sitting in the row ahead of me, so that was cool. Calhoun was sitting courtside doing the color commentary for the game, so it's nice to be surrounded by the legends. And GW just took it to them. They hit the boards. They out-rebounded the Cavaliers 37-33. Three-point shooting wasn't great. The free throw shooting seemed to be the big difference. Virginia was great, 13 of 16 at the line. GW got a lot of calls, 23 of 28 from the line, a plus 12 advantage in attempts. They won by 5. Do the math.
I just saw Virginia get open threes in the last minute and a half.
Yeah.
They couldn't knock a single one of them down.
Right.
I mean, and if you're going to be a championship contender team, which we thought Virginia was going to be, you can't miss those shots.
You can't. I am not that alarmed by this if you're Virginia. I do think that there's more to be gained, and you deserve more credit for going on the road early and playing in a hostile environment against a regional team that's successful. It's not easy to win at GW, and it's certainly not easy when you're one of the biggest home games that they're going to be playing. I think, if anything, in the long run, Virginia's going to take more away from the loss than not and get better because of it. On paper, of course, I mean, it's not as if they won the game, but how much is this loss really going to hurt them? Probably none. They do this every year, and they've lost before. They lost at Green Bay. They've lost to VCU, and they still ended up being okay and even getting a 1 or a 2 seed, I think it was. So I think Virginia's fine. It doesn't really change how I feel about them.
Well, I think we're going to be done with calling George Washington a dark horse for the season after this win as well. They were a lot of people's dark horse legitimately, not because people weren't breaking them. They're going to be a top 25 team next week, obviously. Just a couple other games I want to just quickly point out here before we move on. NJIT won at South Florida tonight over a name brand school, at least. Also, a couple of big score margins. Cincinnati over the weekend beat Robert Morris 106-44. And even worse than that, Butler destroyed the Citadel, scoring 144 points.
If this were Little League, the mercy rule would have been invoked around the 4th or 5th inning.
I'm slipping on the name, but the Citadel has VMI's old coach who runs what you would call a line change style offense. He wants a shot up in 6 seconds. It's a unique system. It did not quite work out the other night. Wow. 104. Yeah.
But I want to move into some couple other pieces of news and notes. And one of the biggest notes that came out over the weekend came from Rhode Island, where E.C. Matthews, their best player of a team that we all liked going to the season, gets injured in their first game of the season, is out for the year. Let me throw something here to John T. Is this that it for Rhode Island?
It is. I forget who had them as their own dark horse, but yeah, that's going to be, I think, an insurmountable injury. He was great last year with 23 points in the second round loss in the NIT to Stanford. The year before, he was conference co-rookie of the year. He really makes the team go, and I know they have a lot of good players around him, but he's just too valuable.
Jesus. Well, I think it was 1999. Rhode Island was in the Elite Eight. They had like an 8-point lead or a 6-point lead with less than.
That was 98.
Yeah, 98. And it's just been such bad luck ever since then. I mean, the way they lost that game, and it's just bad things keep happening to Rhodey.
Yeah, there was one exception in 1999, but other than that, I would agree with that sentiment.
Wow.
A couple other pieces of note here. Utah State, who was my preseason pick to win the Mountain West, I got laughed at for it. Their best player and their only inside presence, David Collette, decided to transfer before the first game of the season. So I retract everything I said about Utah State.
This is beyond... I would categorize this as extremely ill-advised and very surprising. Mm-hmm. When you transfer mid-year, the misconception is that you have to sit out a season. You do not. You have to complete an academic year at your new school. So he is missing all of this year, and if he leaves mid-year, he's missing the first half of next year because he has to go spring and fall before he's eligible. This is just... No one was expecting this. No one from Utah State saw this coming. Everyone was shocked. Any idea what was going on inside his head? And
do we have any mind readers on the panel? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
You always wonder, is he going to think this through and come back to Utah State? He's still enrolled there. It's still possible.
It could be. I mean, he could turn around next week and he'd be playing with the team the week after that. But I think his plan is to move on at this point. One other piece of news that came out this week, now are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 postseason tournaments this year. A new event run by the BD Global Sports Group, the Vegas 16 it's going to be called. 16 teams going to Las Vegas from March 27th through 30th. 16 teams, obviously, that don't qualify for any of the other postseason events. David, you excited for the Vegas 16?
Yes, and we are going. I mean, you have the NCAA tournament, but we are moving forward with the Hoops HD postseason tournament. We're going to take the NIT, CBI, CIT, and whatever the hell this new tournament. All 4 of those winners, and we're going to have our own Hoops HD tournament.
Hoops HD Final Four.
Yes, I just need to get. I need to call Indianapolis and get the paperwork started. We should be making that announcement maybe the next podcast.
Just don't call the Gazelle group, though.
Yeah, well, we'll screw them. And and again, so we got 2 things to do. We got to get this Lopes waiver through, and we got to get this new tournament started. So we're busy here, off and running.
Well, before we get into some of the in-season tournaments, what we want to do is just take a quick look at some of the games that are not part of these bracketed tournaments that are coming up in the next few days. And obviously, we've got to start with the Tuesday night doubleheader here in Chicago.
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Give me half a second here. Kentucky Duke followed by Kansas Michigan State.
Yeah.
Let me throw it over to John S. here on these 2 games. Clearly, the best 2 games have been scheduled so far this season, I think.
Yeah, the first game is going to be the national title game that we were hoping for last year, but Wisconsin kind of screwed that up a little bit. And then the nightcap is going to involve 2 other blue bloods that are part of the regular rotation, including Michigan State and Kansas.
Now, John T., I think we still don't have a ruling on Diallo's eligibility for Kansas. Is this getting a little ridiculous now that they're coming into a serious game?
Yeah, he's got to call Taco Fall's agent, I think, and try to get that paperwork pushed through, because it is almost Thanksgiving and he still doesn't know, and it's tough. Like, I've never been an NCAA investigator. I mean, I'm all for doing thorough investigations, but I don't know when you cut the cord or if you put a time limit on it or how you do it.
Do I need to go to any, like, when I'm filing the paperwork for the Lopes waiver in our tournament, I need to go there and offer my assistance. I can help. I will get this through so we can play. This is absurd. All kidding aside, this is utterly absurd.
And don't worry about those posters that say, "Do not admit this puppet into the building under any circumstances."
Chad's my attorney. He's supposed to be taking care of that.
We also have next week a new event. It's the Gavitt Tip-Off, Big Ten versus Big East, 8 games that begin Tuesday night. Tuesday's games are DePaul at Penn State. We can move on from that. Nebraska at Villanova and Georgetown at Maryland. David, let me start with that Nebraska-Villanova game for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good game for Nebraska. I think it'll end up being sort of a quality win. It's not going to be the kind of loss that hurts Villanova at all.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a destruction here by Villanova. But the other game, let me throw it over here, John T. This is also in your backyard. Georgetown at Maryland, finally getting to play each other, non-conference.
It is. The whole D.C., Maryland, Virginia area is very excited. I think there's a huge amount of pressure on Georgetown after their loss to Radford. And what's worse is that after they deal with the Terps, win or lose, they get the Badgers, who are in a bad mood after their loss. Like, the Georgetown-Wisconsin game, it's almost an elimination game in November, which is ridiculous. But seriously, like, one of those teams is going to have 2 losses before Thanksgiving. It's crazy.
Yeah. John, can we get from Titel a brief history of why these 2 have not played in over 25 years? Or was it 93? Whenever it was.
My brief history is talk to Gary Williams and John Thompson, but I don't know if that's too brief.
Yeah. They can't quite agree on whose turn it was to host the game, and it took them over 20 years to figure it out.
And an event to be scheduled.
Yes.
Them up in. Yeah.
Right. But it's back. It will continue. The series is back, and thank God.
Let me throw. The next game in that series, Wednesday night, the Gavitt Tip-Offs games, Illinois at Providence. A couple of teams that we looked at as being potential bubble teams this year, although Illinois already started off 0-1. Thursday night's games in this challenge, Rutgers at St. John's, in the battle to see who is going to be the worst power conference team in America.
Wow.
as I
St. I am putting the parental lock on my television to make sure that I don't even accidentally turn that game on.
Creighton and Indiana. Unfortunately, the Hoosiers did not get a very good matchup out of this. I think that Indiana is going to roll in that game.
Oh, they kill them. Yeah.
And Iowa at Marquette. You see anything there?
Well, what's Marquette doing? I know. I guess I turn that.
Oh, they're winning. They're up by 4 tonight. They already lost at home. So
I think Marquette. I'd like to say that I still think they have the potential to improve. Winning that game would certainly help out. It's two teams that have work to do, and that could really. It has. When you have teams that have struggled early, those games like that have a pivotal feel almost, even though it is just November.
And let me throw the very last game of the tip-off over to John S. Xavier at Michigan.
Yeah, this is going to be, the Keystone non-conference game for both teams here, and Michigan probably would need the opportunity just as much as Xavier would, because when you look at the Big Ten, it's certainly going to be top-heavy, but some of the teams at the bottom could possibly drag them down in case they stub their toes in conference play.
Yeah.
So who do you think is going to win the game?
That one I'm probably going to go with the Wolverines in that one, but it wouldn't surprise me if Xavier, with some of their talent, were able to go on the road and pull a surprise. But then again, it wouldn't shock me if Xavier wins this game and then lays an egg in Orlando, as we'll be discussing later on tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's... Sorry, David, go ahead.
Oh, no, nothing. Well, John mentioned stubbing their toes. UAB is stubbing their face right now. They're just pounding their face against the wall right now.
Let's get right into our main segment of the show tonight, which is the Exempt tournaments. I've got some that's coming up on my screen already, but before we actually get into the actual games, David, I know you're a bit of a student of exempt events. Can you explain to us exactly what an exempt event is?
Yes, essentially the rules have changed for every year, but an exempt event is it's essentially you're allowed 29. Well, okay, starting up, you're allowed 30 regular season games. The conference tournament in its totality, whether you play 1, 2, 3, or 4, or even 5 rounds in some cases, counts as one of the 30 games. So for all practical purposes, everybody except the Ivy League is allowed 29 games. If you're at an exempt event, you're allowed 27 games in addition to the exempt event. So an exempt event can be up to 4 games. They all have to take place within 14 days, start to finish. All participants must be from different conferences, and that's basically the rule. Many of them are bracketed tournaments, but many of them are not. You see groups of 5 teams that agree to play each other that are all from different conferences within 14 days. That can be considered an exempt event. So what it basically does is that it can arguably give you, instead of the 29 regular season games, it could get you as many as 31. Right. I hope that I mean, that was a simple concept that I pretty much probably complicated. But these events, if you're in one, you're allowed 27 games on top of these events, which are, most of them will give you 4 games, 3 bracketed games, and usually 1 other one.
Right, either 3 bracketed games, or in some events it's 2 bracketed games and 2 home court games. Depends. Yeah. There's lots of different formats out there. We won't go through all of them, but what we do want to run through tonight is all the bracketed games only. We're not going to go through the non-bracketed games or the round-robin events, but we're going to run through every single tournament that's out there, take a look at the fields, take a look at who we feel what the best matchups are going to be, matchups and potential matchups through the tournament are going to be, and throw it out there who we think is going to win each of these. The first events do begin on Thursday with, if we can pull up my screen there, the Puerto Rico tip-off, Temple, Minnesota, Butler, Missouri State, Miami, Mississippi State, Utah, and Texas Tech. Let me start with John T. What do you think about this year's Puerto Rico tip-off field?
I love the coaches. You got Humphrey, you got a Patino, you got
A Patino, not the
Yes,
Patino, A
Ben
Patino.
Howland, you got a whole bunch of amazing coaches, and you have Butler, who I think just scored again. I'm not sure. So
um, yeah, David. Obviously, Mississippi State coming off a loss to Southern now is not going to does not look that great. But we have a potential of a Miami Utah semifinal. A Butler looking who's looked really good. Who do you see winning this event?
I like Butler the most, but I got to say, I was impressed. Not that Miami won the night, but that they destroyed a pretty good Louisiana team, Louisiana Lafayette. We might want to just call them Louisiana, but Miami has looked pretty good. That Miami Utah game, if it comes to fruition, which God, I can't see it not as bad as Mississippi State and Texas Tech have looked, would be really good. But I think I like Butler the most in this tournament.
And I'd agree with that. I think Butler has the easier course to get to the finals as well, and they get if Miami and Utah ends up being a really good game, they're going to get a tired team in the championship. Let's scroll up a little bit here to the Charleston Classic. Our field here: Ole Miss, George Mason, Oklahoma State, Towson, Long Beach, Seton Hall, Virginia, Bradley. Let me throw it over to John S. Virginia coming off of the loss, heading into this event. What do you think of their chances?
Yeah, it would take a real surprise for them to fall in the tournament, but if I had to pick one team that might be able to pull off an upset, it would be Seton Hall and their trio of talented sophomores.
Yeah. Have you been to Charleston? I mean, it really is a nice city. Lots of history there. It's close to some good beach, little towns, Folly Beach. You would think they would be able to get some better teams to come to Charleston. Good grief.
After the Charleston Classic coming up this weekend, Friday and Sunday, one of the best-looking events of them all. Let me throw it to John T. here. Wisconsin, Georgetown, Duke, VCU. Duke coming off the Champions Classic tomorrow night, then gets this event as their next two games up.
well, I would have loved to have been reporting there live, but the press credential request went down in flames, unfortunately.
What?
As my brother-in-law is a Badger alum, I will have to pick the Badgers over Georgetown, and Duke looks pretty unstoppable, so I think Duke is going to win that tournament handily.
Who would dare deny Hoops HD? Chad, we got to get on this.
We're gonna have to work on these press credentials, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now we have some of these events do have visitors brackets, as you see. These are the other four teams that played road games: Siena, Radford, Prairie View, Bryant. I think we can kind of skip over those, Dave, unless you want to comment about them.
No. Well, I mean, Radford with their win should be in the semis, but they're not. So,
Dave, let me stick with you here for the other event. Another event coming up this weekend: the Paradise Jam down in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. You got Florida State in this event. You got Angry Frank in this event. You got your Indiana State team that you like in this event. What do you think of this?
I think Florida State. Well, another team that I like that's out there is Tulsa. And again, I think Florida State and Tulsa are the two best teams out there. It's just unique. I don't know. I could never figure out how these committees put these brackets together. Oftentimes, I thought the two best teams aren't bracketed to meet in the finals, and this is another case of that.
Well, actually, the order of the games of the first day is not the bracket.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
Florida State and Tulsa are on separate sides of the bracket here.
Okay. Those are the two teams I like the most. I'm actually really looking forward to see how Tulsa does out there. And again, that's one of the great things about these tournaments is that it gives you a lot of good matchups and you learn a lot about the teams. It's, as always said, like these tournaments are when the cue ball hits the ball and breaks them apart. So the season will start to take shape after this. But I really like Florida State and Tulsa in this.
I know you like this Hofstra team coming to the season as well, though, didn't you?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if I like
matchup for them in the quarters.
Oh yeah, if they can knock off Florida State, I'll like them a lot more. I don't NCAA tournament like them. I just like them by colonial standards. I don't like them as much as Northeastern, James Madison, who did not look good tonight, and who's the other one? Oh, Bill and Mary. But I do think they're pretty good.
John S., the Hall of Fame tip-off on Saturday and Sunday. Old Dominion versus Purdue, St. Joe's versus Florida. I think that this is another one of those kind of almost an under the radar, just because it's not an event that really has the big names, but could have a couple of really good matchups here.
Yeah, you would probably expect Purdue and Florida to be there, but it wouldn't surprise anyone if Old Dominion were to come out a winner in the first game and also the second game. St. Joe's, I know they have a talented player in DeAndre Bembry, but I really think they're probably a year away from being NCAA caliber again.
I was surprised Joe's beat Drexel. Not that Drexel's great, but I thought Joe's was awful. But they looked good in that game. I've been big on Old Dominion since May. This is their chance. I mean, they don't get many. Playing in Conference USA, they don't get as many opportunities. This tournament is hugely important for them.
Right, and if they lose to Purdue and then they play St. Joe's one way or the other in the third place game, they've lost a huge opportunity there as well.
Yes, they have. I mean, that is, again, it's November, and like John said, it's kind of ridiculous or preposterous to say, but for a team like Old Dominion that's in an under-the-radar conference, this is the kind of event that can really shape your season. It really is.
Let me bring John T. back in here, not for the Vermont-Niagara game. Let's just skip that one, as well as the Northern Colorado bracket. But let's move right on down to the Maui Invitational, probably the most well-known of all the preseason events. Another really strong-looking field this year.
Well, St. John's is there. Yeah, it's not too
Other than St. John's.
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have the surprising Vanderbilt team. You got Indiana and Kansas as the Blue Bloods. UCLA as the former Blue Blood who's not looking so good. Very talented field. I suppose this is Vanderbilt's chance to prove to me that they're legit. If they can hang with an Indiana or Kansas, then they deserve to be ranked. If they can barely stave off St. John's, I'm ready to boot them out of the top 25.
David, let me throw a really important question for you here. Likely seventh place game at 2:30 Wednesday afternoon, November 25th, St. John's and Chaminade. Does Chaminade get another win this year?
Yes, they do. If they, I mean, St. John's is there. The rest of the, I mean, it could be 7 top 10 teams in St. John's, and I'd still say the field is weak.
Personally, I think Chris Mullen was very clever in just laying down for his first exhibition game, because that way they've lowered expectations considerably for the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, they hit the floor and then they started digging. Wow.
The Gulf Coast Showcase. This is a kind of interesting event. This event is run by BD Global Sports, who's going to be running that Vegas 16 event this year. And it is specifically for non-major schools. The one team I note that's in here that we kind of like, David, is the Central Michigan team.
Yep.
And you also got Murray State on the other side of the bracket there.
This isn't last year's Murray State team. I think that's fairly obvious. So while Murray State might have a brand name, at least by under-the-radar standards, they're not that strong this year. If Central Michigan does not roll, I mean, it isn't that winning it makes me think that they're a tournament team. It's that losing it pretty much qualifies them to not be. And they did not look good in their opener. I mean, again, it's one game out of 30, but Central Michigan, if they are an NCAA tournament team, these are the kinds of games you are expected to win on a neutral court.
And so they're your pick to win this event?
Yes.
Let's move on to the Legends Classic. John Eslin, bring you back in here. There's a visitors bracket here where I think we'd all agree that Belmont is the class of that bracket, but LSU, Marquette, NC State, Arizona State. What are your thoughts on this Legends Classic?
Yeah, this is going to be one of the, group of doubleheaders that are going to be played in Barclays Center throughout the course of the year. I mean, we get to see some talented freshmen between LSU and Marquette, and then NC State and Arizona State is going to be kind of the undercard right here, but I think whoever comes out in front between LSU and Marquette is probably going to win that title, and I would give a slight edge to LSU at this point.
LSU's playing Kennesaw right now in one of the, again, like we explained at the beginning, technically it's a 4-game event, but only 2 are bracketed, but I don't know how that's going. I'm assuming LSU's winning.
The next event up is what was formerly the MGM Grand event. It's now called the Men Who Speak Up main event.
This might be the greatest title for an event.
Obviously, the first half of the bracket there is, as the lower teams. But John T,
God,
the second half of the bracket is also 4 lower teams, isn't it?
when you say lower teams, those are some bad ones. San Antonio. Oh God.
I don't think they want to be called flyweights or bantamweights.
This is not the Men Who Speak Up event when you have San Antonio taking on Central Arkansas.
John T, how about the second half of this event here? Clemson, UMass, Creighton, Rutgers. Pretty weak field also.
Yeah, it's not the 2K Classic by any stretch, but I like Clemson. They've got some balanced scoring so far this year with Dante Grantham, Jerron Blossom Game, and Gabe DeVoe each scoring double digits. And on defense, Landry Nanako, 11 blocks in 2 games. Good luck trying to score on him inside the post.
I think it speaks a lot for an event when only one game in the entire event, the championship, is the only one being televised. The rest have got to be streamed. So maybe a better field next year here at the MGM Grand. David, I got to go to you for the CBE Hall of Fame Classic. There it is, the first semifinal, Kansas State and Missouri.
Well, yeah, it's K-State is struggling right now against Columbia. At least they were last I saw, and Missouri's even worse. So, it's a long way from the border war. I don't really know how those two got along. I don't think they liked each other, but they didn't really hate each other either. What's interesting is that Northwestern is kind of a team. We talked about being fringe tournament. Well, if they can beat North Carolina, which I don't think they can, it basically would make a huge statement for them. But how is it? So we have a Final Four caliber team, a bubble team, and 2 sub-200 teams. Nice field.
Well, John T, correct me if I'm wrong, was there an injury from Northwestern? Did they lose somebody for the year? And I'm blanking on this.
Not sure. I know that if there's one person on Northwestern who really wants to beat the Tar Heels, it's their coach who used to play for the arch rival Duke Blue Devil.
That's true.
Yes.
Let's move on to the Cancun Challenge here. Again, another event that has 2 separate brackets in it with the lower division and the upper division teams. Concentrating on the upper division, TCU, Rhode Island, Illinois State, and Maryland. And with the injury now with Matthews out for Rhode Island, John S., is this just going to be the Maryland cakewalk?
Well, I'd be looking at Illinois State as a team that could possibly surprise, but I don't know if they're going to be able to do it against Maryland. But I would like their chances against TCU or Rhody in the third-place game right here. But even then, I might even take a brief look at the Mayan division to see if South Dakota State could possibly get 2 under-the-radar wins to help their cause in the Summit.
I guess the only problem is how much really beating Houston Baptist and Rider or Cleveland State's going to help them. But they'll get a couple games there.
Take them where you can get them.
Yeah.
I'll throw it back to John T now for one of the premier events, the Battle for Atlantis, which features 2 regional rivalries in the quarterfinal round. What do you think about this event? Let me throw it over to you.
So you have the Battle of the Longhorn State with A&M against Texas, which I think is going to be fantastic. They're both young teams, especially Texas, with the new coach, with Shaka. This will be his first exposure to how big basketball is in a football state. And then the other one I'm looking at, actually, they're all pretty good. I want to see Gonzaga if they can play more than 20 minutes. It's weird that Gonzaga and Washington got shipped across the country, across the globe. Now they're shipping them back to play in the Bahamas. Like, I don't know who's making these travel plans, but these guys are going to be very tired, I think.
From China and Japan to the Bahamas. Yeah, that's a heck of a flight. And then that Michigan-UConn quarterfinal game is a real interesting one as well, I think.
Oh, yeah. 2 ranked teams. So, yeah, this is a solid event. And I mean, this one actually, another thing about exempt tournaments, the reason you were able to play more games, at least when they started, was to help offset the travel cost. Because if you were going to Hawaii or New York, there weren't any payouts. Now that they're now there are payouts with these tournaments, albeit it's much less than what a team generally gets for a bye game, but not this one. And that's why this event is able to attract such quality competition. They pay out close to $200,000-$300,000, I think, per school. So that's why they can get these kinds of teams out there.
Well, given how this is probably the premier event in terms of the teams, I'll throw it out to each of you. Who do you think is going to win this field? David, let me start with you.
Gonzaga. I just think that once they play more than a half, they're the best team. I think they got it.
John T.
I will go with the Michigan-UConn winner, and to be honest, I do not know who's going to win that game, but I think that each team has some solid coaching and can use that as a springboard to make a nice run.
How about you, John S.?
I think Michigan is going to be the champion of this tournament. It wouldn't shock me if Syracuse found a way to surprise Gonzaga in the tournament either.
And that was going to be my call here, actually. Well, Syracuse, this is not, its bracket's a little bit funny. Syracuse-Charlotte winner plays the winner of the Michigan-UConn game. I wouldn't be surprised if Syracuse pulls off that upset, though, but I see Gonzaga being your champion. I'm with David on that one. There's a bracket of games between the teams that play the fourth game against those opponents, but let's move on to
who's in that again. Oh yeah, just the fourth game. Okay,
just the fourth game teams play each other. But moving on to the Great Alaska Shootout, this used to be one of the premier events. It has now become. It's almost sad to see what's happened to this event, I'd say.
That was in the days of the 2 and 4 rule when you could only play 2 exempt tournaments every 4 years.
Right, and this was never as big as the preseason NIT was the biggest. Maui was big too. This was not a BCS bowl, but it was a pretty Cotton Bowl-ish. It's still a big deal to be there. It's turned out to be just about nothing. What happened to this tournament? Really, it's a well-run event. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and it's not the bad trip here. I mean, it is Alaska in November, which isn't great, but it's I mean, look at this year's field. I think Loyola Chicago is the best team, probably by a fairly strong margin of this field, and they'd be my pick to win it.
Yeah.
Let me go now to probably another really strong event, one of our top 3 or 4 events. Let me bring John T. back in again. The Advocare Invitational. This used to be the Old Spice Invitational, now called the Advocare. Played down in Florida there at Disney World. Alabama, Xavier. Well, you got Wichita State, you got Notre Dame, you got Iowa, you got Dayton, and you got those Monmouth Hawks. Obviously, the committee organizers knew that they would have a UCLA win going into this event.
Yeah, I think that the Shockers are the class of the tourney. Do not sleep on the Iowa-Dayton winner. Again, one of those I don't know who's going to win, but both teams are good and have good coaches and can use that to make a nice run.
John S., how about Xavier's chances in this field?
Well, given if this were the Sean Miller era at Xavier, I would like their chances, but ever since Chris Mack took over, this is usually a time when they're tinkering with their lineups earlier in the year. So it wouldn't surprise me if they went 1 and 2 again against this field. But realistically, I think they beat Alabama, lose to Wichita, but their final game would be a toss-up. But I do think Notre Dame could possibly win the title here as well.
You agree with that, David?
I like Wichita. I mean, I like a lot of teams in the field, but I just think Wichita is the class of it. It's interesting, Xavier Dayton, old Atlantic 10 rivals, both in this bracket but on opposite ends of it. They don't play each other anymore. You kind of don't like to see that, especially after you saw Virginia GW tonight. It's just a regional out-of-conference matchup that you'd like to see. And even if they play in this event, it's still, well, why does it take going to Orlando to make that game happen? But that would be a game of intrigue if it were to come to fruition. But as far as who I think is going to win it, I think Wichita is just better than everybody else.
Well,
go ahead.
I'm going to go against y'all. I'm going to take Dayton to win this event.
How important is this tournament for Wichita, being that they don't, again, they're a top 10 team that doesn't get many cracks at ranked teams after this? Anybody?
Good point. But let's move on to the one legacy. These games played out in Fullerton, and then for the final round in Anaheim, California.
Oh,
Couple of teams here, definitely worth noting. Probably your finals: Michigan State and Arizona. John T, you're our Arizona guy. Tell us about their exempt tournament this year.
I mean, I know some people don't think Michigan State's going to be like a top seed in the March bracket. I think they will. I'm biased, so I'm going to go with Arizona to win it. I think they have a great track record of playing well in the state of California. They have a lot of recruits who come from there and a lot of students, so they have a huge fan support when they go play out west. You can never count out Tom Izzo, obviously, in the Spartans. And the best player in the bracket, of course, Chris Dunn, who is just putting on a show already in November. He's going to keep doing it. If Providence somehow makes a tourney, it's going to be only because of him.
We got an interesting Chris Dunn versus Ballantyne matchup there in the quarterfinals with Evansville. David, you're probably excited about that game.
yeah, I think that one's going to – I mean, I think Providence is the better team, but it's a great opportunity for Evansville. This whole tournament is really because, beating Providence gets them another chance. And if they lose to Providence, they're probably going to be – who are they matched up with against their –
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. So that is kind of pivotal because, Irvine's okay, but – really, you got to win the game if you want cracks at teams that are likely to land inside the bubble. So that's a pivotal quarterfinal game for a program like Evansville. And how about Boston College? What do we like about them?
Well, why don't we turn to how the mighty events have fallen here? The NIT season tip-off, formerly the preseason NIT, used to be a single elimination 16-team event. It's now a Villanova and 3 other event. John S., your thoughts on and it's now not even in Madison Square Gardens anymore. It's moved over to the Barclays Center. What's happened to this event? Anybody?
I'll just let the music in the background do the talking for me.
Oh, man. What happened?
I've seen better days. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't want to get too philosophical because if this is a loaded question, we'll just move on. Does it have anything to do with when when the NCAA took it over and took it away from MEBA? Or is that just a coincidence? Anyway.
You also have to remember the last time Stanford played in New York, they did pretty well. They won the 2015 NIT title game over Miami in overtime.
Let's move on to the Las Vegas Invitational. We'll go to the main bracket there. West Virginia, Richmond, Cal against San Diego State. I think this is a pretty interesting event, actually.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Those are 4 pretty good teams. I like Richmond. I know that they fell to James Madison over the weekend. It seems like I always like Richmond. And, again, this is a chance for them to pick up some notable wins.
Well, John T., what do you think? Do you agree with David that Richmond might have a shot here, or are you looking at where I am, which is the Cal San Diego State winner?
I disagree that Richmond has a good chance to win it all. I mean,
oh no, I didn't mean to say that. If they can win one game, I think it would be good for them. Yeah, sorry, but
so noted. I do think that the California teams are great. San Diego State, as we speak, is hanging with Utah on the road, but it's going to be tough because Utah's ranked and the Aztecs are not. As far as Cal, I'm happy to report that the freshmen are for real. We weren't sure. Their first game, Jaylen Brown, 14 points in 15 minutes, and Ivan Rabb, a double-double in 16 minutes. Obviously, the level of competition is going to be jumping up with the Aztecs, as will the level of defense, but the freshmen do seem like they are for real.
I'm going to go with Cal to win this event also. That's where I'm leaning. I think it's going to be an interesting test with San Diego State. I think they get by them, and I think they play West Virginia in the championship game. I think Richmond goes 0-2, David. Sorry. But moving on to the Emerald Coast Classic here. Let's Chattanooga you got playing in the visitors bracket, but in the main bracket, Iowa State, Vatech, Illinois, and UAB. David, is this the Iowa State picks up 2 victories event?
Yes, very much so. Against teams that are, Virginia Tech is not good. Illinois is not good, and UAB is not good. So I think Iowa State rolls.
John S., you agree with him?
I don't know how you can't disagree with them, but
I was looking for some crazy upset pick. I can't do it either here, but let's move on to the Corpus Christi Challenge. We've got a visitors bracket there with some great teams like Alcorn State and Abilene Christian. But let's stick with the main bracket of that event. Not that strong of a field this year in Corpus Christi. Colorado State, probably the premier team there. John S., your thoughts?
oh, I'm sorry, I was distracted because Marquette just went into overtime with IUPUI.
That's probably more interesting than these four games we're looking at anyhow. So, John T., any thoughts on Corpus Christi?
I hear it's lovely this time of year, but I don't know that I would travel there to watch a championship game of Colorado State and UTEP.
Yeah. The Barclays Center Classic, the visitors brackets, a couple games we played at Army's home campus, actually, in West Point. But the main bracket is a little bit interesting here with a couple of should be ranked teams in Cincinnati and George Washington, along with both Nebraska and Tennessee. David, given that we're talking Nebraska.
Well, why don't you think Nebraska should be ranked? Games on ASN, they're going to destroy the planet. I don't. Cincinnati's on a roll. They've played Nebraska before and lost, but then again, that's just what happens when you take on 10 miles. In all seriousness, I think GW was good, but they're not at home tonight, or they're not going to be at home for this. I think Cincinnati wins this. I was not big on Cincinnati at all over the summer, but I am now. They return a lot. I think Cincinnati is really, really good.
I agree with you, John S. You live in Cincinnati, in the Cincinnati area there, so let me throw it over to you before we move on. I agree with David. I think a George Washington-Cincinnati championship game here could be one of the better finals in any of these events, and I do like Cincinnati as well.
Yeah, I think we were expecting to see a defensive display with Virginia and GW, but Cincinnati can also take it to another level against the Colonials. But the Bearcats, if you're worried about them scoring just enough points to beat GW, go back to their game against Robert Morris from Sunday.
106 points, yep. A little bit of an offensive output there by Cincinnati. The Sun Bowl Invitational, this is not even technically an exempt event, but it is bracketed, so we listed it on here. I don't think it needs much discussion. I know we do like that UC Irvine team in the Big West.
Yeah.
But the Global Sports Classic will move to its main bracket. And this is where we've got to have a little bit of a discussion. David, tell us about the team that's playing in the Global Sports Classic December 21st and 22nd this year.
Well, it's Grand Canyon. It's the team of the people. We covered them last week. It's your Grand Canyon Antelopes. We got to take to Twitter, hashtag Lopes Waiver. There it is right there. We need to get them into they're a transitional team, so they're not eligible for the tournament. So we're going to Twitter bomb, phone bomb, do everything we can to get the NCAA to give them a waiver. In all seriousness, I think they're the best team in this tournament by quite a bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they took home some hardware here.
Well, I think their game against Houston could be an interesting one. That may be probably a tougher game.
Yeah, I know you like Houston. I'm not as sold on them yet.
Let's move on to the Las Vegas Classic. John S., let me bring you back in here for the main bracket. Kent State, SMU, Colorado, Penn State. Is this another thing where we're just going to give SMU 2 victories and move on?
Well, there would be some years where I'd say watch out for Kent State, but I don't know if this is going to be one. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Penn State pulled off a mild surprise against Colorado either before the Mustangs inevitably get a pair of wins in Vegas.
It'll be the only hardware they're able to win.
Except the polyester bowl at the end of the season against Cincinnati.
John T., any thoughts on this Las Vegas Classic?
Yeah, I would not pencil in SMU and put them in the bank. They did have a nice win already, and they have a nice supporting cast now, but their big stars, Nick Moore, had a whopping 8 points in 31 minutes. Marcus Kennedy, 7 points and only 3 rebounds in 16 minutes. So if the stars do not come out to shine in Sin City, I don't think that I think it's far from a done deal for the Mustangs.
And do you think it's just going to be a matter this year that it's going to be tough to get these kids to play up to their full potential with nothing really to play for?
I do. I mean, I don't know what their goals are. If they want to make the NBA draft, then they obviously have to play hard. But if they really wanted to win a championship, then get them next year.
Their only championships they could win are the Las Vegas Classic and the American regular season title this year. So let me stick with you, John, on the very last exempt event here, December 22nd through Christmas Day, December 25, the Diamond Head Classic out in Hawaii, with Auburn, BYU, Oklahoma, among other teams.
I don't think Harvard's going to be able to win this tourney. It would be great to see the matchup farther down the line if Auburn and Washington State can somehow face each other. The Cougars with Josh Hawkinson, Auburn with Simeon Bowers, two of the better big men that nobody knows about, and just the contrasting styles of somebody like an Oklahoma against a BYU seems like an odd little matchup. I think might be nice if we can get it to happen on the court.
I'd love to see that as the third place game with Auburn, Washington State, and the championship with Oklahoma, BYU. I think those will be a pair of really neat games on the 25th. David, your thoughts on this event?
There's no better way to spend Christmas, and this is what Christmas is all about. This tournament, and the games come on at 1:00, and I mean, it's how you avoid having to spend quality time with your family. You just get a case of beer, turn on the TV, and just watch basketball all day. No, Christmas Eve is a problem.
You're watching the Star Wars special, right?
Yeah, well, there's the Star Wars special. I mean, and then there's like Christmas. I don't know. Like, I've got all these little cousins and stuff that want to watch Christmas shows, and I just have to say, I'm watching the Diamond Head.
Let me throw one last topic out here before we call it quits for the night. We're only 4 days into the season, but there were a lot of rules changes this year. Just want to throw it out there. What did you think about the effect that the rule changes have had on the pace of play and the way the game is being played so far? And I know it's kind of early to take a real study of this, but just on your early thoughts on it. David, why don't we start with you?
Well, I wasn't too excited about the shot clock changing, but I don't think it's really made that much of a difference. If anything, it's kind of made the game better because it's not been the lull. I love the fewer timeouts. I wish there were even fewer than what there are. All in all, the one, I guess the big thing was them trying to clean up the physicality of it. I just hope they stick to that. I know it makes for some eye-gouging, unwatchable games early, but if they stick to it and the players adjust, the game will get a lot better.
Well, it might just be me, and let me throw something here to John T., but it seems to me that I'm seeing games that are going final at an hour and 45, an hour and 50 minutes instead of 2 hours and 15 minutes already this season. Maybe it's just me, but it seems like games are getting done a little bit quicker.
I think they are, and I'm all for that. I think it's also nice to see, as a fan, I mean, it's nice to see Virginia and Arizona throw in the pack line defense and watch the other teams wither, except not obviously with George Washington today. But to see the scoring go up, because I was worried that if you can barely have a good offense with a 35-second shot clock, it's only going to get worse if you have 5 seconds less to run the play. When you look at some of the scores, Iowa State scoring 106 today, Indiana scoring 102. These are good offenses, efficient teams, and the more possessions they have, the more they can use them to score more points.
John S., your thoughts?
I think there's another change that people aren't realizing is that coaches can no longer call timeouts while they're in play, although they can still direct some of the players to call a timeout. And I know Virginia, GW, I think there was one instance in the final minute where GW might have called timeouts instead of getting half-court trapped, but it turned out not to bite them. Oh, by the way, during the Xavier-Miami telecast, the announcers seemed to be under the impression that teams now had 6 fouls, and no one bothered to correct them at all during that TV broadcast.
Well, we have new rules that some people know and some people don't, apparently.
Right, yeah.
But let me throw it around. Any other final thoughts for the evening? Let me stick with you, John S.
I don't have really anything other than what we've already discussed.
Yeah,
but we'll still be keeping tabs on Marquette here, who is I can't
Marquette
see.
is still struggling with IUPUI as we record this, so everybody in the morning, when you watch this, you'll know the results. Though, let me throw to John T. Any other thoughts about about what our first few days here and what we've got coming up?
So I got to give a shout out to Penn sophomore guard Sam Jones from the great state of Arizona. He comes into the Ivy League country, he's scoring like 22 a game, but it's hilarious. 0 assists, 0 blocks, and 0 steals. All the guy does is score. That's it.
Well, if the score's enough, the Penn will look pretty good, though. David, any final thoughts, especially with, I believe we've got another 24 hours worth of consecutive basketball left here still to go as of right now.
Yes, just what we talked about at the top of the show. The season has started. You can go to the games. Get out there. These games really do matter. We were kind of making light of it, but these are important games that do shape the season. Things don't just fall out of the sky. That GW win was big. For a team like Belmont to go on the road is big. They got another big game tonight. It isn't just something that falls out of the sky after the Super Bowl. The whole season matters, and I wish more fans would get out there early. And on top of that, I wish more teams would give their fans more of a reason to come out early instead of just going to the bakery and eating a cupcake in front of a half-empty arena.
Well, my final thought is actually to follow up on what David just said here. Coming up tomorrow night, Grand Canyon will be playing Black Hills State, a Division II school.
Yeah.
You want to see what fans should do for all these teams. Take a look at this video stream, or if you can get it on TV if you live in Arizona. Watch this game here with Grand Canyon. They've had great crowds for exhibition games. Their fans turn out. It's a wild atmosphere, and another reason why NCAA let the Lopes play.
Let the Lopes play. Give them the waiver.
But on that note, Lopes waiver. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll be back later on this week with it Under the Radar and another Hoops HD report next week. Thanks a lot and take care.